let's jump straight in, because being a lunch and learn, we want to get as much out of this as possible, as quickly as possible. And we think about half an hour of power is probably all we're going to need to really take a look at the 3 easiest ways to nail your next presentation. Now, our latest April newsletter called Insider Tactics went out with this topic. So the 3 easiest ways to nail your presentation. And the reason we wrote that article is that it's probably the most common question we get is, how do I improve my presentation skills? What can I do? We wrote that article, and that was our April edition. And the response we've had has been pretty overwhelming. So we said, let's all jump on a call and we'll record it, because there's some really great little nuggets of further information that we couldn't add into the article that we want to share as well. And I've got a couple of slides to share with you. When it's not really death by PowerPoint, it's more conversational, this session. And to join me in that conversation is really our gutsy presenting guru, Jenny Lord. How you doing, Jen?
Hi, Luke. Nice to be here today. I love that we say it's not going to be a death by PowerPoint, because that's probably one of the extra tips as well from giving a good presentation, is not having the death by PowerPoint. But yeah, thank you for having me, join you today, and love talking all things presenting skills. It's just so ingrained in who I am these days. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Excellent. So the reason we invite Jen is not only she a great friend of Tactician and works extremely closely with us, but I think out of all the gutsy presenting and gutsy pitching programs that we have, I think Jen delivers probably 90% of them. So it's really, the skill set that you really enjoy, but also are really quite good at. And at times, we will also lean on you to help us out as well. So I don't think, if you feel like you're quite competent in this, you still always need a bit of practice and a bit of feedback. So I really appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, no problem.
We love this program, Gutsy Presenting, and I'm going to get straight to kind of what we're going to cover in just a moment. As we're going, please feel free to jump in and ask questions either via the chat or even just jump in and interrupt us. It's pretty relaxed and casual, I guess, is the way to put it. So we are going to get straight to the 3 ways. And during each of those 3 ways, we are going to share just maybe one piece of content just to expand on what was in that newsletter. More importantly, to give you something to test, trial, kind of, see if it works for you as we go through each of the 3s to nail your presentation. And often I get the question, Jen, around, oh, I've got a presentation I've been given for next week or for next Friday. What can I do? What can I, what's the first thing I can jump into and look at? And that's where we can certainly help out. But, these 3 ways we chose, or the 3 initial ways you can nail your presentation, I think are the most common that we get asked. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's take a look at those 3 ways, and then we'll jump into some more content. So like we said in our newsletter, structuring your presentation. So what and how you say it, and the order in what you put it into, really important piece. Knowing your craft, and really, this is the piece that I really like, is the style of your presentation and what you can do and play with in how you present. And then, of course, honing your own voice and tone to really highlight and impact the different areas of your presentation as well. Out of those 3, Jen, what do you think is probably your strongest?
Oh, my strongest.
Yeah.
I would definitely try and go for probably my voice and tone with my delivery style. I probably rely on my personality to bring a lot of the content alive. I'm probably one of my own areas for ongoing development is making sure that I've nailed my content, but I know that I can deliver things in a way that keeps people engaged, which is, I'm all for my Angelou quote around people remember how you make them feel, not the words I've said. So that's probably my biggest area of focus. But I think I'm still someone who practices, especially around that structure and just getting that flow right, because the other stuff comes a bit more naturally. So that's where I need to probably focus. So yeah, it's that double-edged sword, I suppose.
Yeah. And often, we do so much virtual presenting like this today, is it doesn't really matter if it's face-to-face or virtual. The structure doesn't really change. It's pretty much the same and embedded into it. And when you think about structure, I think about, that's the boring part. That's the part you've got to, you've got to write out and do the pre-work, if you like. The presentation style, voice and tone is kind of the fun, creative part
Yeah. But then for some people, it's the bit they hate the most. They
Yeah.
go, no, I'm quite happy sat down behind the computer, mapping out my structure, working out my content, making it look great. And then the bit that is the challenge for others is that, oh, now I've actually got to talk about it and make it sound as engaging as I think it is in my head. So yeah, the balance is really important. So these are three really good areas we're focusing in on today.
All right, good stuff. Let's jump straight into structure then. So structuring your presentation and how to do that, and what's, we'll share a technique in just a moment. But I can remember this really clearly. Someone come to me saying, great, I've got a presentation. Here are my 6 pages of notes that I've written out word for word. How do I structure it? If someone comes to you, Jen, with that, what's your initial reaction?
Oh, I'd be like, 6 pages? How long is your content for? How much time have you got? And trying to get people to bring it back a step. I think people approach presentations in different ways. Some people go straight to script writing, as you say, and they've got pages and pages of stuff to work through. And then others jump straight to PowerPoint and grab some slides and start playing with pictures. So I think the big thing around the structure is being really clear on what is your objective you're trying to achieve? Like, why are you there talking to these people? And then start from there and kind of build out from that. So I think detailed people go straight to the 6 pages of content, and the real visual people will go straight to the slides. But we have to press pause before we even get into that part and go, okay, let's just think about what are we trying to do here, and think about the best way that we can actually start to break that down and start small and filter it out a little bit.
Yeah, it's always that, that key piece of what do you want them to walk away with, but also how much time you got, how much time you got to play with. And that really dictates how in which you structure your presentation, majority of the time as well.
And I think people forget that everything takes longer than you think it's going to take. So if you are prescribed a time of, say, 20 minutes, you think you're writing 20 minutes worth of content, but you're probably giving yourself like 30, 40, even an hour's worth of content, because it's easy to fill time, and that can be a real killer for people, that we have too much stuff to say.
Yeah. And you're exactly right, because, often in our programs, we give people, you got 5 minutes to do a presentation, off you go. And they think that's a huge amount of time, but they know the content so well, they get so passionate about it, they want to talk about it. 5 becomes 10 really easily. Quickly.
Yeah. Or the alarm's going off because your 5 minutes is up and they're still on the intro and context setting and haven't even got into the content yet.
All right, well, let's take a look at our first tool then, and it is around structuring your presentation. So I'll bring it up, and of course, Jen will get you to talk this through. And I remember when I saw this for the first time, I'm like, it can't be that simple. It's about beginning, middle, and end. I just think that sometimes, that's 3 steps that everyone knows about, but potentially we don't use it, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's as simple as it sounds, but it's not always as simple for people to apply. And I think, again, coming down to that time that we give ourselves to prepare and thinking about, well, how much time have I got? How much time do I need? But really, the bit everybody's generally really good at is the middle, because you know what you're going to be talking about, and we've got the content, we're a subject matter expert, or else why are we talking about that particular topic? And the bit we quite often, and what I see a lot, is that people don't do the beginning and the end enough justice. So having a really strong beginning, because this is where we've got to get people engaged. We want people to want to listen to us, but in order to get them to want to listen to us, we need to tell them what we're going to tell them. We need to give them that overview, set that context. But also the bit people forget is introducing themselves. And who am I? What's my right to be here? And how am I going to be the best person to tell you about this stuff today? So that's the real, sorry, there's some background noise going on just there. I'm not sure. Might just get, I think it might be Stefan. We might just get you to mute if that's okay, Stefan. There might be a bit of background going on. Brilliant. Thank you. So beginning is the bit that's really important, I think, to kick us off strongly, to assert our authority to be there, set the tone, and really introduce our topic area. And what we see a lot is that people just launch straight into the content without doing that part at the beginning. So as it shows on screen there, it's really simple, but setting the scene, setting that context. But then again, at the end, like we need to end on a high as well. So what is it we have talked about? What is that key message or that call to action, or the main thing we want people to take away from our topic that we've been talking about? And let's really reiterate that at the end. So we're ending strongly and powerfully, and that key message is really staying with our audience there as well. There's a bit of repetition. So as we can see there on screen, it is a bit repetitive, but that's how people retain information as well. So if we start out by introducing our topic, this is what I'm going to talk about, then we go into that detail, but then we bring it home with that wrap up and reiterate those key points. We know that the most important parts are the bits that will sink in because they're the ones we've focused on the most.
I think, sometimes I see, when people don't necessarily have that beginning, they jump straight into content. You can get a little bit lost sometimes as a viewer, where if the beginning's done really well and there's a nice little bit of engaging information or a hook, as an audience member, I'm like, oh, hang on, I'm going to stay and listen to this. So this has really intrigued me. And then they can use that hook again right at the end. So there's nearly a connection between the beginning piece and the end piece, not just from a content and what you've covered, but the interesting hook or idea you had right up front. And we talk a lot about this in pitching. Often, what's the thing, what's the problem, what's the interest, and then what's the solution? And that's very similar when it comes to actually making a presentation as well. You really only have that 8 to 10 seconds to grab people's attention, otherwise the brain starts wandering.
Yeah, especially in a virtual setting. I think it's even harder, isn't it? As we all know and experience, I mean, half the challenge is getting people to attend in the first place. But then when people are here, if people aren't engaged pretty quickly, they've got a computer there with emails and other stuff going on, and it's really easy to get distracted and start doing other things. So as Luke said, we want to get people engaged and get them hooked in from the start. So if we start strongly, then people will stay with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, all the random things that can distract you at home, especially on a virtual call, it's tough. And it could just be your email, it could be the dogs around you, whatever it is.
Whatever it might be, yeah.
Yeah. The beginning, middle, and end is really the first piece, or the piece we'd really strongly advise everyone to use when structuring out your presentation. So we're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, essentially your agenda. Okay, we get that. The middle is kind of the chunky bit, right? It's we'll tell them what you're here to do and what you want to tell them. And then at the end, you tell them what you've told them. So essentially there's a summary there and, a link back to the original piece of content. What about time, Jen? How would you kind of break up the time for this?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Luke. I was just thinking the same thing. I get asked this a lot. Well, how much time do I have for my beginning versus my middle versus my end? We typically, when we run Gutsy Presenting, we give people a 5-minute presentation to prepare and deliver. And I encourage people to, if you've got 5 minutes, give yourself a good minute for your intro or your beginning aspect. Give yourself a minute for your wrap up, your ending, and then you've got 3 minutes worth of content there in the middle. And that kind of scales up. If you've got a 20-minute presentation, you've got a good couple of minutes there, a good kind of 3 or 4 minutes for your intro and your beginning and your context setting and your credentials and all that kind of stuff and your agenda overview. Same sort of thing at the end. And you've probably got maybe 10, 12 minutes of actual content. But yeah, definitely factor that in with your planning. And as I said earlier, that this is where your time runs away, because your middle piece is the stuff that we can fill really easily. So we've got to be quite tough on ourselves when we're developing our content, so we give ourselves enough time for the beginning and the end pieces as well.
Yeah, and to assist with that time kind of constraints as well, that we do have a tool called a planner, presentation planner, which we can certainly send out to someone. If you're interested, please let us know, and we can reach out to you guys and send that out to you. But yeah, it's a nice way to structure your presentation, and also it's really important to keep it and thinking about timing in this beginning, middle, and end piece.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we should maybe move on to point 2. So that's the first way to tell our presentation. The second one, as I said before, this is kind of the one I like to just play with a little bit because it's fun, is knowing your presentation style and what it actually is and how to utilize it throughout a presentation. I see so many people hiding behind a lectern at times or gripping the lectern like they the dear life. It's often the way that, even though you might be presented with a stage and a lectern in something that's face-to-face, doesn't mean you have to use it. So knowing your presentation style and what you're comfortable with is really, really quite important. So I might bring up just a couple of words, and as we go, Jen, we might just address each one if that's okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right, so here's our first one, move with purpose, our friend little penguin there. I don't know about you, but when I get nervous, and it's most of the time I get nervous, or, I have this nervous energy, is I want to move around a bit when I talk, especially if it's a face-to-face boardroom presentation or, larger presentation. I think it's really important to ensure that you're moving with purpose and your movement's not becoming distracting. You agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And one of the things we practice, and this one is probably more focused in on the face-to-face presentations, but as you've mentioned, Luke, like the lectern is a killer in terms of being able to connect with an audience and have that interaction and have that ability to move around. But what we see when we watch really engaging presenters in action is they work the stage, and they have that stagecraft and that ability to move around the room and get closer to an audience and step back and maybe interact with a whiteboard or some slides, and then move to another side of the room. And having this ability to move with purpose sounds really easy, but it's amazing how many people forget how to use their legs when you've got a group of people looking at you in a presentation format. And I see it all the time. Like suddenly people become like jelly legs or become like robots and think, oh my God, how do I move? How do I get from there to there? And we're like, it's called walking. We've been doing it since we've been about 2 years old. And suddenly we're in this presentation mode and we don't know how to do it. So it's something you absolutely need to practice if it's not something you do naturally, but it's something that makes a huge difference in your delivery in terms of your confidence and your presence when you're out the front with an audience.
Yeah, it's a great way to connect with the audience, I think, too, is, move enough, but not too much, and know who and where to connect with, especially if there's questions as well that come up. You can use that.
Definitely. Yeah, get closer to the person that's asking the question.
Very good. All right. One of my favorites, hand gestures. We know that, happy hands, spirit fingers, whatever we like to call them. The hand gestures can be really impactful. And, it's, even I'm standing here and I'm actually with my hands, but you probably can't see them. So here we go. Here are hands. I actually use my hands quite a bit, and it's really important, not only from I think a pace perspective, because your hands can help you slow you down, but also to really emphasize points. Whether it be, pointing at something at the screen, pointing to a question that comes out of the audience. So really important to understand and use during your presentation, but can be quite difficult depending on the environment you're in. So sometimes, in a large face-to-face environment, you might have to hold a microphone. You might have a clicker for your presentation. That takes away sometimes a lot of those important hand gestures that you can actually make. Yeah,
definitely. And being able to get used to doing those things as well. Hold the clicker naturally and not point and click like we see people do, and the clicker's quite magical. It just works. We don't have to point and click. We can just use our hand gestures and pretend we're not holding a clicker. But then you add a microphone dynamic in, you've got to keep the microphone in front of your face without then distracting yourself with your hands or being distracting to your audience as well. So really powerful when done well, but again, something we need to practice if we're not naturally someone who will use gestures. Well, then I'd argue that probably everybody does. If you're out in a cafe having catch up with your friends and chatting about what you've been doing on the weekend, people are naturally more animated. But then again, we get into this presentation mode and suddenly we become bit nervous maybe, or we get a bit more static in our style. So being able to free yourself up and use those literal gestures, as Luke said, to point at things and demonstrate sizes and shapes and things, and using our hands to convey that mood and tone and expression that we do naturally. But again, we can sometimes forget. So being conscious of what we're doing with our hands is really important. And we'll touch on it later, but things you can do to help implement that, and just paying attention to yourself as well. And what do I do with my hands? And especially in this virtual setting, as Luke said, we can't always see our hands, but can you position yourself so your hands can be in use and visible to the audience that you're working with as well?
Yeah, they're often really good for grabbing attention, whether, if the audience has laughed at something or if there's a conversation going on, you can wave your hand, and that often will bring the attention back to you as the presenter. As well. So yeah, already there's a lot to think about, but let's have a look at some facial expressions. Because, especially virtually, I can actually see when there's a camera on, I can pretty much see when something's going on or there's someone's laughing. And it's really important that we actually utilize and see facial expressions. So, we have to understand when we're presenting, sure, we're talking about what's going on, and we need to be animated in the way we talk and the eye contact as well.
Yeah.
What would you comment on this one, Jen?
Oh, I think we just got to be consistent as well. So if we're trying to get some energy and excitement and we're very poker faced saying, I'm really excited to be here and I'm very pleased to be sharing this with you, but our face isn't telling that story, then that's really incongruent, isn't it? And we pay far more attention to facial expressions than we realize. I mean, we know there's research that our pets pay attention to facial expressions. So if our pets are paying attention, we know an audience is paying attention. So we need to be consistent with what we're doing, what mood and tone we're trying to convey. Am I talking about something quite serious? And I need to show that this is important and it's really serious, and it impacts your gestures. And in our program, we do activities where we get you to prove through activities that what you're doing with your face and your hands absolutely influences your ability to speak and being able to have all of those things in alignment. But again, some of us, it comes naturally, some of us not so. And I think this virtual environment just heightens all of those things even more. Like, we've got to be engaging. I just mentioned to Luke before we got into this today that I'm sick of seeing boring people talking in a boring way about topics that probably aren't boring, but they come across really boring because of the way they're being delivered in a virtual format. And we just got to get a lot smarter at this kind of stuff. Like, be that game changer, be the one that people want to listen to. And you can show that through your gestures and your facial expressions and the next bit that we're coming to as well. So just really be aware of who you're being when you're in front of a group. Am I aligned with what I'm trying to portray right now?
Yeah, I think I actually had one further one here also that I added, I think, around your energy levels. And that's kind of, it's a really interesting one. It kind of links the three together, really, is be really conscious of your energy level. If you bring a certain energy level, most people will match it, or they'll come to, 80%, 85% to similar levels. So when you are presenting, it's important that you nearly describe or prescribe the energy level that's coming across. So, it's something to think about how and what you do, but also link those three pieces together. And I love that last piece there. If you are stuck, or if you're nervous, then move, and that gives you the opportunity to think about what's next, or take a pause and take a few steps to the left, and then continue speaking. And that's a really great thing to think about, is your style is the pace, the energy of the room, and you're the one dictating it. So don't be afraid to utilize these tools and tactics.
Yeah. I think people don't realize how influential they are. Like, we're way more influential than we think we are. So you can actually influence a room just by the way you're doing all of these things we've got on screen here.
Yeah, great. All right, let's move on to number 3. And our third one was around voice and tone. And voice and tone, I think it's so easy. We talk every day. Voice and tone, how important is it? And I think it's nearly the third, even though it's the third point, it's probably the most important piece. I've seen this work incredibly well, but also incredibly poorly, where presenters, whether they're shy or unsure about themselves, present in a very monotone way, and that can become very hard to listen to. However, I've also seen it the extreme of the other way, where someone's yelling or shouting and it continues at that same pace. So this is your opportunity through voice and tone to vary what you say and how you say it, to get attention and to really emphasize certain points.
Yeah, and we're very fortunate, Luke, aren't we? We do a bit of work with Macquarie Uni, and we hear from uni students that are going in for a pitch competition, and we give them feedback on their pitches that they're putting through. But some of the ones that really stand out for us are the ones that do this exceptionally well, and they become like natural storytellers. They've got the inflections, they've got the pauses, they've got the pace just right. We're drawn in just by that style of their voice and that delivery. And it absolutely makes a massive, massive difference. As Luke said, it's really hard to pay attention to things that are delivered in a monotone way. But if you can deliver a message using the right inflections and tone and setting that mood and tone and that energy that you're really looking for, having that connection with your audience, it makes an absolutely huge, huge difference. And coming back to my earlier point around that, how you make people feel, that's the stuff people remember. And that's, most of it comes from your voice and tone, and how is it you're describing, what is it you're saying, and is it coming across in the right way? And as we've got there, just those 3 key things around being able to make that connection with your audience, having that commanding presence, having that confidence in your delivery, but being really compelling in that message. And I'd encourage you to pay attention to really good TED Talks or really great public speakers that we see that we know do this really well and really play on their use of voice to have the impact that they need to have. And we share some various examples in our programs, but you know, if you're comparing Barack Obama to Emma Watson speaking to the UN, and there's so many different ways of delivering, but it's what's right for your content at that point in time, but also what's right for you. Like, you've got to be authentic in your delivery as well. So not trying to be someone that you're not, but making sure that you can tick off all of these things that we're trying to share with you today.
Yeah, I think authenticity is a really important point, right? It's, do I believe this person? Am I engaged by this person? Do I want to hear more? And I was, I yesterday pulled a couple of slides together for this, and I was watching the news last night and actually thought, oh, this news presenter is actually really authentic. And he was really authentic because he was doing these 3 things and really, connecting with the audience, had a presence about him, but also had some compelling information and messages. But the tone of voice changed, especially when it came to, a very serious accident or something that had happened. So it's really nice to see this, when done properly, this is something that actually pulls people in to a conversation or to a presentation. And it's one of those really great techniques you can play with, especially when you want to emphasize something.
Yeah. I think one other example that I think we've seen, and maybe it's the British in me, but watching Prince William recently, there's been lots of royal family members all talking. It's been the King's coronation over in the UK, but Prince William is someone who always gets really great press for being really authentic. And if you pay attention to how he speaks when he presents, he ticks all of these boxes as well. He's kind of like this understated, commanding presence that he has, and the choice of words that he uses, and he has just the right level of humor in there that he can get away with in his role, but he has that connection and he has that real authenticity to it as well. So yeah, there's great people that you see do it really well, and they're the ones to pay attention to and go, oh yeah, look, I could try that in my presentation, or try that technique for myself.
He had a nice subtle dad joke, just a little one in there to start with, didn't he?
Loved it.
All right, so that's our third piece to nail your presentation. I'd probably just like to leave everyone with a couple of tactics before we wrap up for the day, because we're kind of steamrolling to our end of time. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but if I move on to one of our final slides, just around some of the tactics that you can actually use to assist, is sure you can use these 3 pieces that we've told you about and explained. However, we always start with don't let fear get in the way. And those of you that have worked with us before know that we love fear and fear factors, and we love understanding what is holding people back. So if you're afraid of something, we take the view that, well, you've got to do it, you've got to address it. And that's something we're really passionate about. So if there's a level of fear, please lean into it, get gutsy. And then that second point there, ask for feedback. And really the second and last point kind of tie together. So ask for feedback from people in your household, the people you work with, the pets, if they're watching you as you present. But also, prepare with some external coaching. Sometimes it just takes 15 minutes, a conversation with a friend, a mate, or someone like us to say, hey, have you thought about doing this? I don't really understand what you just said. Just some really external piece of feedback that really helps coach you to refine the pieces of information you're sharing. And a quick example there, I had a friend the other day who submitted an application for a TV show and actually sent me the video beforehand saying, can you take a look at this and just let me know what you think? And he was actually applying for Survivor, and he had to, as part of that process, pitch himself essentially and present himself. So it was a really great way for me to look at how he constructed the presentation, but also, went back with a couple of pieces of feedback around, well, I don't really understand this bit. You might want to say that differently. Just a couple of pointers to help him really hit the nail on the head when he's talking about himself and why it'd be great for that show.
Yeah, that can be the hardest bit, actually, just talking about yourself.
Yeah,
I think that links back to what we were talking about earlier with the beginning component of your structure and your credentials and outlining that kind of stuff. That's the bit people get the most uncomfortable with, actually just talking about themselves. People are generally pretty comfortable at talking about the content, but don't really like talking about themselves. So we just skip over it, move on to the rest of it. So being able to practice that, and as you say, like getting some feedback and people that will give you proper feedback, not just say, I mean, you did a great job. It's like, well, how? Why? What did I do that was really great? How, like, help me know why you felt that was good. So getting proper feedback, I think, is really important as well.
It might be a good opportunity just to pause. If there's any questions, please pop them into the chat. And maybe if anyone has any questions and they're popping in there, I do want to take 2 minutes just to tell you guys on how we take a lot of these tools and actually implement them as well. So we have, if you like, 3 different versions of the Gutsy Presenting program. One is a light version, which is a 1-day intensive. There's a little bit of pre-work involved in that one. And we come along ready with a presentation. And we also have the core 2-day Gutsy Presenting program. And of course, we've got some virtual delivery options, and they involve a theory session and then a virtual practice session, approximately 2 weeks apart. So there's an opportunity to, take some time, develop a presentation after the theory piece, and then come back and present with a critique as well. So if you're interested in any of those programs, please let us know. We will wrap up the recording here and send that out, so you've got this to refer back to. And even if you just want to give us a call or an email and ask a couple of questions or ask for a couple of tips that might be more relevant to your presentation, I'm happy to take that on board and hear from you guys as well. So Jen, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with prior to us wrapping up today?
Well, I'd like to assume everybody's already following Tactician on LinkedIn, but if you're not, then please do. And yeah, drop us a line. And if you're not already receiving the monthly newsletter that Luke mentioned earlier as well, because we do share some great tips and tricks on there, and we've got different topics and themes that we cover off each month as well. So yeah, jump on the mailing list if you're not yet, and follow us on LinkedIn, and yeah, just reach out. We're always happy to have a chat and look at how we can support you with whatever your presenting needs are, whether that's more in that virtual setting, if that's mostly how you do present these days, or if you've got a conference coming up. We do some tailored sessions with groups that have got like big conferences where we go, okay, let's practice some stagecraft and working through presenting to those bigger audiences as well. So absolutely able to help in that space.
Just a quick question from Shirley here. It's just popped into the
chat.
And Jen, I'm sure you want to answer this as well, but this is
yeah.
skill I had to learn very early on and still struggle with sometimes, is how do you slow yourself down when you speak too fast? So what are some tactics to help slow your presentation down? Because often you're really passionate about the content, right?
Yeah, we've got to build in pauses. That's probably the number one tip with regards to our pace and our speed. If we can build in those pauses, it has a double benefit of giving you a chance to breathe, because we can forget to breathe when we're in the zone and we're excited and focusing on our content delivery. But it also gives your audience a chance to catch up, and it gives you that reminder that, oh, actually, I'm getting a bit fast here. I'm getting a bit carried away. So I need to pause, breathe, slow down a bit, get myself back on track. But also something we mentioned earlier was around the movement, and moving actually helps us control our pace as well. So if we're stood still and we find that we're getting a bit faster than we should be, actually, if we have a slow, controlled movement across to perhaps the other side of the room or moving towards something else, that can get rid of some of that nervous energy that we're experiencing as well, and help us control our pace a bit more.
Yeah, top tip there by Alex as well. I think the PowerPoint rehearsal feature is a super cool tool to use.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to move on until the slide changes, right? And that's a great way to slow you down, or even, like you said, Jen, ensuring you think about taking a breath, using movement to yourself down as well. Yeah.
And I think as well, we've got on there around using the mirror, but I think even recording yourself, like jump on Teams, jump on Zoom, hit record presentation for one, and then watch it back. And that's a really great way of seeing how fast you're actually talking in real life as well, because when we read things in our head when we're practicing, it's not the same speed as when we're in live delivery mode. So having a recorded meeting and watching yourself back, it's a brilliant way of getting that feedback.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Well, Jen, thanks so much for being with us. We're going to do a monthly webinar or information session after each newsletter. So keep an eye out for the next newsletter coming out in a couple of weeks' time. And then we'll schedule another session probably late in May, early June around that topic area as well. But yeah, thanks for joining us today. And I'm sure we send a copy of this out to everyone who registered for the session. So enjoy your lunch and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you all.